Hello, it is me, Adam. And this is our first resume of a niche of the most marketable books in the financial world. We are starting today with a book that I honestly believe changes the way people look at their wallets, not because it tells them which stocks to buy, but because it tells them why they buy them in the first place. The book is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Now, before we start, I want you to forget everything you think you know about finance. We are trained to think that money is like physics or engineering. We think that if we just learn the formulas, if we just master the spreadsheet, we will be rich. We treat it like a hard science. But to start a book like this, we have to admit that money isn't physics. It's psychology. It's not about how smart you are, it's about how you behave. And behavior is hard to teach, even to really smart people. You can be a genius who loses it all because you can't control your emotions, and you can be an ordinary person who retires wealthy just because you learned how to wait. So, the main keys of this book really begin with a concept that Housel calls, "No one is crazy." I love this starting point because it is so human. We look at other people, maybe our parents, maybe that friend who is day trading crypto, or maybe our grandparents who stuff cash under the mattress, and we judge them. We think, why are they doing that? That's irrational. But Housel reminds us that your relationship with money is cemented in your early adulthood, specifically by the economy you grew up in. Think about it. If you were born in 1970, the S&P 500 increased tenfold when you were a teenager and in your 20s. You learned, at a visceral, emotional level, that the stock market is a wealth-generating machine. But if you were born in 1950, the market went literally nowhere for 20 years. You learned that the market is a scam. Now, fast forward to today. Both of those people are looking at the same chart, but they are seeing two completely different realities. Neither of them is crazy. They are just victims of their own history. That is the first lesson. Stop judging how other people spend their money, and stop beating yourself up for your own fears. You are just navigating the world through your own unique lens. But once we understand that we aren't crazy, we have to look at the two forces that actually dictate our success, and these are two things we almost never talk about in finance classes: luck and risk. Housel tells this incredible story about Bill Gates to illustrate this. We all know Bill Gates is a genius. He worked hard. He is brilliant. But consider the luck involved. Bill Gates went to Lakeside School in Seattle. In 1968, this was virtually the only high school in the world that had a computer terminal. If Bill Gates had lived down the street, or gone to a different school, there is no Microsoft. The odds of him being at that school were 1 in a million. That is luck. But here is the other side of the coin, the part that gives me chills every time I think about it. At that school, there were 3 computer prodigies. There was Bill Gates, there was Paul Allen, and there was a third kid named Kent Evans. People say Kent was the smartest of the group. He was the one who was supposed to run Microsoft with Bill. But before he graduated high school, Kent Evans died in a mountaineering accident. The odds of dying on a mountain at that age are roughly 1 in a million. So, Bill Gates experienced 1 in a million luck. Kent Evans experienced 1 in a million risk. They are the exact same force, just moving in opposite directions. The reason this matters for us, and for you listening right now, is that we have to be careful when we look at success and failure. When we see a billionaire, we tend to ignore the luck. And when we see a bankrupt person, we tend to ignore the risk. If we can learn to forgive ourselves when things go wrong, and be a little more humble when things go right, we will have a much healthier relationship with our money. Now, moving deeper into the book, we have to talk about the hardest concept for humans to grasp: compounding. We all know the definition of compound interest, but we don't feel it. Our brains are built for linear thinking. If I tell you to calculate 8 plus 8 plus 8, you can do it. If I tell you to calculate 8 times 8 times 8 times 8, your head explodes. There is a chapter in the book that talks about the Ice Ages. For a long time, Scientists couldn't figure out why the Earth had ice ages. They thought maybe the sun got cooler, or the Earth shifted. But it turns out, it wasn't a massive freeze that caused them. It was just a cool summer. That's it. A summer that was slightly too cool to melt the previous winter's snow. So a tiny layer of snow stayed on the ground. That layer reflected sunlight, which made the next year a little cooler, which left a little more snow. Compounding. Over thousands of years, that tiny leftover snow turned into glaciers that covered the world. This is exactly how money works. You don't need massive returns to get rich. You don't need to find the next Bitcoin or the next Tesla. You just need a cool summer. You need average returns, repeated for a very, very long time. This leads us to my favorite distinction in the book: the difference between getting wealthy and staying wealthy. These are two completely different skills. Getting wealthy requires you to be an optimist. You have to take risks, you have to put yourself out there. But staying wealthy, that requires paranoia. It requires you to look at the world and say, this could all be taken away from me. Housel uses the example of Jesse Livermore. If you don't know him, he was the greatest stock trader of the 1920s. He became famous because he shorted the market just before the 1929 crash. In one day, he made the equivalent of billions of dollars. He was the richest man in the world. But he was all offense and no defense. He thought he was invincible. 4 years later, he had lost every single penny and took his own life. Compare that to Warren Buffett. We study Buffett for his stock picks. But we should study him for his survival. He has survived 14 recessions. He didn't panic and sell in the 70s, or the 80s, or 2008. The key to his wealth isn't that he is a genius stock picker, though he is. The key is that he has been investing for 80 years. He survived. So if you want to apply this to your life, start thinking about your survival mindset. Do you have enough cash on the side to survive if you lose your job? Can you endure a 40% drop in the market without selling? That is the skill that matters. And this brings up a huge philosophical question that Housel asks: when is it enough? There is a story about the writer Kurt Vonnegut and the author Joseph Heller being at a party hosted by a billionaire hedge fund manager. Vonnegut asks Heller, "How does it feel to know that our host makes more money in a single day than you made from your book, Catch 22, in its entire history?" And Heller responds, "He may have that, but I have something he will never have: enough." This is the trap of the modern financial world. The goalpost keeps moving. You get a raise, so you buy a nicer car. You get a bonus, so you buy a bigger house. Your lifestyle inflates with your income, so you never actually feel wealthier. You just feel more pressure. The hardest financial skill in the world is getting the goalpost to stop moving. If you can define what enough looks like for you, not for your neighbor, not for Instagram, but for you, you have won the game. But let's talk about what we actually do with our money when we have it. We buy stuff. And usually, we buy stuff because we want people to respect us. This is what Housel calls the man in the car paradox. We have all done this. You see a Ferrari driving down the street. You look at it. You might think, wow, that is a cool car. But you almost never look at the driver and think, wow, that guy is cool. You don't care about the driver. You are looking at the car and imagining yourself in the driver's seat, thinking about how people would admire you. Do you see the irony? The driver bought the car to get respect. But you aren't giving him respect. You are using his car to fantasize about your own respect. Housel's rule here is brutal but true. Humility, kindness, and empathy will bring you more respect than horsepower ever will. So, if we aren't supposed to buy Ferraris to impress strangers, what is money for? What is the actual point? My critics, and I have some thoughts here, often say that finance books are boring because they just tell you to save. And Housel does tell you to save. In fact, He says you should save just for the sake of saving. You don't need a goal. You don't need to be saving for a house or a car. You save because the world is unpredictable. You save because hedge funds fail, because pandemics happen, because jobs disappear. Savings are your hedge against bad luck. But the real value, the absolute core of this book, is the idea that the highest dividend money pays is freedom. It's not a 5% dividend from a stock. It is the ability to wake up in the morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. Control over your time is the single biggest predictor of happiness. More than your salary, more than the size of your house, more than your job prestige. If you make $1 million a year but you have no control over your schedule, you are not wealthy. You are a highly paid employee. But if you make $50,000 a year and you can fish whenever you want, or pick your kids up from school, or work on a project you love, that is wealth. This is where my opinion comes in, and where I want to offer a bit of a critique of the book, just to keep things balanced. I absolutely love the message of the psychology of money. It is comforting. It takes the pressure off. It tells us that being average is okay, as long as we are consistent. But, if I am being honest, there is a certain level of privilege in this advice. The book assumes you have enough income to save. It assumes you have a surplus. For people living paycheck to paycheck, simply changing your psychology doesn't put food on the table. Also, the book is very defensive. It is about preservation. It is about not losing. But look at the people who changed the world. Look at Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. They were not reasonable. They were not safe. They bet everything. They were irrational. If everyone followed Housel's advice perfectly, we would have a very stable world, but maybe a less innovative one. However, for 99% of us, for me, for you, we aren't trying to colonize Mars. We are trying to retire without eating cat food. We are trying to put our kids through school. For us, being reasonable is better than being rational. Housel makes this distinction. Rational means making the mathematically perfect decision every time. Reasonable means making a decision that lets you sleep at night. For example, mathematically, you should pay off your mortgage as slowly as possible if interest rates are low, because you can invest that money and make more in the market. That is rational. But if having debt makes you anxious, if it keeps you up at night, then paying off the house is reasonable. It buys you peace of mind, and peace of mind helps you stay the course. So, as we wrap up this resume of The Psychology of Money, I want to leave you with a final thought, a summary of how to move forward from here. Money is a tool for independence, not a tool for status. The world is full of people who look rich but are living on the edge of bankruptcy. And the world is also full of people who look modest but are completely free. You get to choose which one you want to be. My advice: stop trying to be a genius. Stop trying to beat the market. Stop trying to impress people who don't care about you. Focus on your survival. Save money just because you can. Define what enough means to you before the world defines it for you. And remember, true wealth is what you don't see. It's the options you haven't exercised yet. This has been Adam, walking you through the psychology of your own wallet. It's a journey, not a sprint. Take a breath, forgive your past financial mistakes, and start building your freedom today. Thank you for listening.